Houston Indie Media, part of Independent Media Center's international network of producers bringing you grassroots, non-corporate coverage of global and local events.
AconC works to be a tool for freedom in content expression and an information revolution.
This week's show is brought to you by AconC Productions, news, community, and cultural conversations to agitate, organize, and cultivate. This is Angela con Courtney.
AconC Productions.
Monday, October 12, 2020, the city of Houston marked its first official Indigenous Peoples Day. Here are some sounds from that declaration on the steps of City Hall.
Happy Indigenous Peoples Day. I'm so happy to celebrate and learn about my ancestors.
Good afternoon. Thank you for everyone for being here today. Happy Indigenous Peoples Day here in Houston. I want to start off by thanking Bianca Raythar Rivera for her tenacity these past few years of coming to council every single year with a group of Indigenous people, asking council to please officially recognize Indigenous Peoples Day on the second Monday of October. And this year is the first year that we are celebrating that. We are joining 130 cities across the country, 14 states, and the District of Columbia. Today is the first day here in Houston that we are celebrating that. And I want to thank Mayor Turner for placing it on the council agenda so that way council can vote on this. 14 said yes, that we need to recognize the Indigenous people of the Americas for their contributions, their histories, and their cultures. On October 12, 2020, Indigenous Peoples Day will be observed in recognition of those numerous contributions that Indigenous peoples have made to the United States. The City of Houston commends all involved in this worthwhile endeavor and extends best wishes for a successful observance on the first Indigenous Peoples Day in the City of Houston.
Before I read this last sentence, let me acknowledge Councilmember Robert Gallegos, because he has truly championed making this happen this day. So thank you, and then Bianca, thank you, and all those who have shown up repeatedly and asked for it. So let me say this: therefore, I, Sylvester Turner, Mayor of the City of Houston, hereby proudly proclaim this day, October 12, 2020. As Indigenous Peoples Day in the City of Houston. Congratulations.
The Invisible Black History of Dominican Republic. Prior to the arrival of Christopher Columbus, the Taino, the native Caribbean people, thrived on the island they named Haiti. They were depicted as kind and gentle people in early writings. The Taino people went nearly extinct due to the mass enslavement, warfare, and diseases brought on by Spanish colonists. By the 16th century, Spanish colonization had control of the island, and with it came racial prejudice and the first transports of African slaves into the Americas, known as the beginning of the Atlantic slave trade. On Christmas of 1521, enslaved black workers collectively planned and executed the first slave revolt in the Americas at the sugar plantation of Christopher Columbus's son, Diego Colón. Spanish forces put an end to the rebellion and implemented a set of punitive slave laws in 1522, which stripped the rights of black people and slaves on the island. By the 18th century, the Spanish elite ruled over a mostly mixed population made up of Africans, Tainos, and Spanish people. Around this time, due to heightened concerns over the growing power in Haiti, Dominican Hispanic nationalism emerged. The social elite and upper class spread anti-Haitian attitudes and rhetoric to promote division between both colonies and people. Being Dominican meant one was Hispanic and not black, regardless of skin tone, distancing Dominican identity from blackness. The racialization of the Dominican identity became embedded with anti-Haitian and anti-black ideals, which have plagued the nation ever since. The Trujillo regime between 1930 and 1961 pushed for the whitening of the Dominican population and the erasure of its African heritage. Various tactics were used, such as genocide, the distortion of history in textbooks, and the use of religious doctrines. The regime further promoted beliefs based on white superiority, colorism, racial division, and xenophobia. Although the Dominican people fought back against the dictatorship, many anti-black ideologies continue to disturb Dominican culture today. Time and time again, they have attempted to negate our black heritage, contributing to a shared false consciousness of identity. Anti-Haitian and anti-black rhetoric are still prevalent in modern political discourse, as exemplified in the 2010 immigration policy, which attempted to strip Haitian immigrants of their citizenship. Systemic racism and xenophobia have become normalized in many spheres of Dominican life. Now is when we break the cycle of distorted truths and let our black history breathe and be known. Now is when we rewrite our narrative. Now is when we join our ancestors and fight for black freedoms and dignity.
Akwe. My name is Andrina Wakantashkwa Waneyu Smith, and this is the Darker Red Road. Wait, there are POCs in the Hamptons? I know, not the first thought that comes to mind with the Glamptons, but I'm born, bred, and bled there, and there's a whole legacy of real colorful ancestors who combined to make me. And when people hear that, they want my rendition of Get Out, the sequel, the Hamptons edition. Because my hometown has transformed into the kind of place with real estate too precious for my color face. But when it comes to my journey, it's a unique case because a lifetime at private schools has given me a pass. I couldn't register for white privilege, but I got to audit the class, and fluency in the oppressor's language has given me the task of speaking my story before it's been asked. I'm Native and Black, some no man's land POC, because when you think Indigenous people, none of your thoughts come to me. And that wasn't by accident. It's all by design in this system constructed by colonial minds. But my tribe, we've been here since immemorial times. We were skilled wampum makers, this land's first currency. We mastered our land and even the leviathans at sea. Colonizers would come to marvel at our stock. Those natives from Moby Dick, yeah, they were straight Shinnecock. And 400 years later, here we remain, underneath the same banner with the same name and terrain, stepping on the scene in a fully beaded chain. But they've twisted being native, so let this be a ligation. We are not a race. We're 573 independent sovereign nations. But making us a race frees the feds of their treaty obligations. But my blood bleeds Shinnecock. It's my crown and glory. This may be my poem, but it's all of our story. I'm Native and Black stories are kept from the collective consistory. But as long as there's breath in my lungs, Scout's honor will be more than a footnote in history.
October is Hoodoo Heritage Month. The next voice you will hear is from an Instagram live of Chantrell Lewis as she talks about the history of hoodoo and other African spiritualities throughout the Americas.
And speaking of hoodoo, I want to share a little bit about some thoughts that I've been having for quite some time now. And I think in light of Black is King, thoughts that need to be shared, I'm going to share them here on this video. I want to break down some quick distinctions for folks, because right now everybody is Black and biggity Black. All of y'all who isn't really here for expressing your Blackness in a particular way, welcome. You know, there's some of us who have been on it since birth. But, you know, shout out to evolution and growth and all of those other things. So shout out to all the people who are like newfound buku Black folks. Also, welcome to those of you all who are just coming to this realization that Christianity, Judeo-Christian practices weren't necessarily created for, by, or about Black people, and that the way we came to Christianity, the vast majority of us, was through the lens of enslavement and colonization. So in reference to Black is King, I just want to just break down some very, very basic concepts for folks. In terms of the receipts, in grad school, I studied, comparative African spirituality. I am not a scholar of specific traditions. I would call myself a scholar of comparative African spirituality. I am a practitioner of one specific tradition, and I'll say two, and I also pull from other sources, but I'll explain it as well. So, in reference to Black is King, the first thing that I want to say, and I'm going to go backwards, is hoodoo is not voodoo. I know there are a lot of millennials who are into hoodoo for lots of different reasons. I think they're actually great, and I'm going to share them with y'all. I think a lot of millennials have found their way to hoodoo for a lot of different reasons. It's very practical, it has function, it's accessible, and it's real immediate, right? And it also is devoid of a lot of hierarchy that folks are trying to leave from in terms of escaping the church and Christianity. So shout out to everybody that found their way to hoodoo. I think it really skipped over us Generation Xers and baby boomers, but our grandparents, great grandparents were definitely into the hoodoo. If you want to study hoodoo and understand really what it is, because hoodoo is not voodoo, which is a spiritual system that is rooted in Benin amongst the Fon people who found themselves in Haiti and then also found themselves in New Orleans. Hoodoo is not voodoo or vodou. All right, so I just want to say that. Oh, I was going to say are you very interested in learning about hoodoo, there is a book that is a must-have, Mojo Working. This was actually written by Dr. Katrina Hazard Donald. She is a sociologist, an anthropologist, an Africana studies scholar. She is also an initiated Lukumi Ogun priest. But if you want to understand hoodoo, how it came to be, how it is actually a specific, diasporic, religious system outside of these other major overarching systems that I'll share a little bit about, you should absolutely read this book and also understand the difference between the old school religion, hoodoo religious complex as she defines it, and the hoodoo that came from snake oil salesmen and marketeers, people were just selling dream books and oils and incense and stuff like that in shops just to make a whole bunch of money off of poor Black people, because that also happened. Now, I'm not talking about people who are out here selling herbs and incense and lots of other curios and stuff for people to create change in their life, because that's a very real thing. But I'm talking about people who are largely outside of the community, who were just selling a lot of products to sell to Black people. What happens to a dream deferred. The second point that I want to make is that all Yoruba practices in the New World is not Ifa, okay? So when Nigerian Yoruba people particularly were brought into the New World. They were largely brought to Cuba. They were largely brought to Brazil, right? And then some of them were also brought to Trinidad. Those were primarily the places where Yoruba people were brought. But of course, we know during the transatlantic slave trade, people got sold, to the Caribbean, sold to the U.S., ships got hijacked by pirates and then came to the U.S. or went to the Caribbean or went to South America. So there was a mix of people in all different places, right? But primarily where Yoruba people were brought, Nigeria, Trinidad, and Brazil. So with them came their cosmology. There was some practices that stayed in Nigeria and that, I won't even say were untouched, because guess what? Africa had colonization people. So even though folks on the continent were not enslaved, they were colonized, shrines were destroyed, lots of practices were broken up. Most Nigerians are hyper holy rolling Christians who think that African spirituality and Yoruba spirituality is demonic and problematic. So Yoruba, right, when it was brought to these different places, it was in many ways syncretized with Catholicism, because in Cuba, the Spanish, the Portuguese. In Haiti, it was different because it wasn't the Spanish there, it was the French there in New Orleans, right? And then also the Spanish also governed Louisiana as well for a particular period of time. But those are all Catholic spaces. The U.S. primarily outside of Louisiana and the Louisiana territory was Protestant. So there was a difference between Protestants and Catholics and how they even saw enslaved people, whether or not we had souls and spirits and all that kind of stuff. It was very easy for enslaved Africans to syncretize their traditions and beliefs, particularly in these places with like dominant Yoruba people practices, right? And it evolved. So out of that came Santeria, Lukumi, which are two different systems as well, very, very similar, but unlike Santeria, which still acknowledges the saints, like, so for Shango, that's Santa Barbara. For Alegba, is often seen as Saint Anthony of Padua. I think Oshun is Our Lady de Regula, something like that. I don't know as much because I can't remember, and also because I don't worship the saints like I used to when I was Catholic growing up. But all that to say that they was syncretized, right? In Brazil, the same thing. In Candomblé, which is the derivative of Yoruba spirituality that's practiced in Brazil, it is Candomblé. And in many ways, that was also syncretized with Catholicism. Because guess what? Our religions, our spiritual, sacred technologies, cosmology, was really connected to our rebellion, was connected to revolt, and was connected to our independence, our agency, and freedom. Because remember, folks, the Haitian Revolution started off with what? A voodoo ceremony. So why would white people want us to be practicing our own spiritual systems if they were getting us free? Even and most especially after the Haitian Revolution. So that's a whole nother conversation, but we're just focusing on here. So you got Santeria, Lukumi, which again, they called this group of Yoruba people, it was like the Lukumi was a particular ethnic group of Yoruba folks. And there's like a lot more information in books. Scholars have written about it extensively. Practitioners who really know these oral traditions can talk about it more extensively. But so you have the Lukumis. And like my tradition, my house, and how we practice my Ile, we do not worship the saints, all right, not or venerate the saints, because it is like very African centered. My house is originated from the first African American house to be initiated in the U.S. outside of Cuba or Puerto Rico, or that's the other place there were like Yoruba people in Puerto Rico as well. So outside of those places, Candomblé in Brazil and or Nigeria, right? So in Lukumi, our divination system is based on the Marin de Lagoon. And I'm probably not saying this right, but guess what? I'm from New Orleans, not Nigeria. So the Marin de Lagoon, or the 16 cowrie shells, which is different from the divination system that is associated with Ifa, which is governed by Orunmila, who is is an Orisha, like all the other Orishas, right? But that's a very specific divination system. So under that system, there are like Babalaos, Iyanifas. That's a whole nother topic of conversation that I'm not going to get into today about that specifically. So you have Yoruba, you have Santeria, you have Lukumi, you have Candomblé, which is very matriarchal, which is found in Brazil, where like these black women who are mostly Yoruba, but again, there's also like people from the Congo, people from Angola, all these different ethnic groups coming together. But the dominant spiritual system that held there was that of the Yoruba people. So when Beyonce is talking about Oshun, since I don't know if she's been in Nigeria, maybe she has or whatever like that, more than likely she is not referencing Ifa. She's more than likely referencing Lukumi, right? Or Santeria, because in the New World, there are lots of Ifa practitioners. There are tons of Ifa practitioners. There's a huge Ifa community, particularly in Atlanta, right? So they got Ifa folks here in Philly, in New York, in Miami, like all over the place, all over the world. There's lots of Ifa folks. There's also lots of Lukumi people, right? And so there is a difference. So like all forms of Yoruba spirituality are not Ifa. So I just want to break that down. Also in Trinidad, there are the Shango Baptists. Now, I have not been to Trinidad. That's like the only place in the diaspora, particularly where there's like a strong concentration of like African spiritual practice, that I have not been. Everywhere else, I've been there. So, but the Shango Baptist tradition in Trinidad. So that's the second point, that all forms of Yoruba spirituality, folks, is not Ifa. The third point that I want to make is that all African spiritual traditions are not Orisha based. Like, you know, and I've talked to my elders about this. I don't necessarily agree per se with all of their views on the dominance of Europe. I mean, Yoruba culture is just dominant, period. It was dominant before the slave trade, after the slave trade. It's just like a dominant culture. But there are other forms of African spirituality that are very alive and well. Everything is not about Orisha. Everything is not Oshun, Yemiya, Shango, you know, Obatala, whatever. You know, like there are other spiritual practices that are being practiced not only on the continent, but also in the diaspora. Largely Vodou, which is alive and well in Haiti, in New Orleans, throughout the U.S., and in Cuba, particularly in Santo Domingo, because there's a lot of, you know, Haitians that are in a lot of Haitians in Cuba. Also, there is, and the Vodou is, of course, practiced in Benin. Vodou is practiced in Togo as well. You have Zulu spirituality and like Sangomas, and Shona spirituality in Southern Africa. You have AconC spirituality, which is also alive and well here in the U.S. And in Ghana. And so it's not a practice of a belief in the Orisha, but in the Abuson, right? So, and again, I might not be pronouncing all this stuff right, but I am from New Orleans. So I will always preface that it's going to always come out sounding very New Orleanian before it sounds like anything else, because Tony be trying to check me on my Yoruba, even when I be saying his name. So then I'm like, I'm just going to say Tony instead of saying Oluwatoyi or whatever. Anyway, so, you know, you have AconC, you have Vodou, you have, you know, like Zulu spirituality. There's Winti in Suriname. Like I was blessed to like meet Winti priests when I went to Suriname in the rainforest. I, you know, have a lot of friends who are in, you know, practice Winti in Amsterdam and wherever they're found around the Dutch Caribbean diaspora. So you have that happening there. So the whole point of that point is that all African spirituality is not Yoruba. A lot of y'all are doing y'all DNA, and which is dope, you know what I mean? And you might be finding, you might be like Yoruba, Igbo, Fulani, you know, I don't know how many folks in the slave trade might have been my size, because that was in East Africa. So just focusing on the West Africa. But Congo spirituality, which is also huge. Another system, Palo, came like largely out of like the Congolese spirituality and Bakongo spirituality. So, and it's also found in like popular culture, and it's also really closely connected to Hoodoo as well. So there are these different systems, and then there's of course what we created, our ancestors here in the U.S. created, Hoodoo, right, which was a system based on like the amalgamation of a lot of different systems, but primarily Congolese, you know, like spirituality and like working with roots and herbs, and like other practices and beliefs. So I just want to kind of give like an overview, a primer, as like people are like breaking down, talking about stuff, might not have that much like experience with it academically or in terms of practice. There are a zillion books. There are also YouTube videos. Of course, there are also lots of crazy people out here who are also spreading like propaganda in the name of African spirituality. There's also rap beef between people who say like, if you want to practice African spirituality, you need to go to the source in Nigeria. They got people on this side of the Atlantic was like, oh, y'all just watered down and y'all just trying to make money off of African Americans. Like, it's, you know, it's like, and the Cubans are like, the African Americans don't know these things because they didn't speak Spanish and they didn't get certain rites and rituals when they took it over to African America. Then there's some African Americans that criticize, like, you know, the syncretization of, you know, Catholicism and Christianity and stuff. So there's also rap beef in these, you know, African traditional religious spiritual streets. There's also people who even deny that Hoodoo is even a religion. You know, I've seen folks that say you got to do Hoodoo before you could do, you know, other things like get initiated in like Yoruba or whatever. And also everybody ain't supposed to be a priest. Everybody ain't supposed to be initiated. Everybody ain't even got it in them to go through that year of initiation, because that ain't no joke. But there's a lot of wealth of information. There is a lot of wealth of experience. There are lots of practitioners who are out here giving readings. You don't have to get an Ifa reading. You don't have to get a Lukumi reading. You could get a Vodou reading. You could get a just spiritual reading, because there's also a spiritismo and spiritualism. And so somebody might be reading some bones. Somebody might read some dice. Somebody might read, you know, foxtrails if you go into somebody like in Mali to read you or something. So there's a lot of information. There are a lot of people. There are a lot of resources. I'm in the process of like creating some tools for people to access, to, you know, tap into this information and these resources. But I just wanted to share that so folks could know a little bit of what's going on here, because I think people are, you know, some people are intimidated. Some people are like, I don't know where to even start, where to begin on getting this information. And so I just wanted to share that with folks. And then you could DM me if you want to get a reading. Primarily, though, you could DM me if you want some resources or like some books and stuff, because I have amassed a huge library on everything, all things related to comparative African spirituality. So with that said, I hope y'all have a good Wednesday. I was also going to give y'all a community reading, but I think this video is a little bit too long at this point. But I'm going to do that in my next post. But just wanted to share that. Number one is Hoodoo is not voodoo. Number two, all forms of Yoruba spirituality references to is not Ifa. And number three, all forms of African traditional religions are not Yoruba. You got other stuff out here, folks. So like I'm gonna give y'all an example. My line sister, one of my line sisters who I've been friends with since we were 18 years old as freshmen at Howard, she was a lady of the quad. I thought lady of the quads were corny because I'm like, how you gonna pledge a dorm sorority? But anyway, she is also the 15 on Spring, Atavistic Spring 2000, Alpha Chapter, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. So my line sister is an AconC. She is an Acon priest. She graduated, that's the language is used, like it's like a 3-year initiation process, which is different from our like 1-year process in Lukumi. And she's an AconC, she's an Acon priest. And so the way they do things is different than the way that we do things. But most African spiritual systems, I will tell you this, overarching, they're monotheistic. There's one God with a capital G. So whether that's Nana Baruku, whether that is Oludumare or Lofi, there is like one God typically in African spirituality across the board. Then there are like these lesser deities with like a little lowercase g that are associated with nature, with human characteristics. So that's why you'll see like Shango, who actually was a real king of the Oyo Empire in Nigeria a long time ago. But Shango is the god of thunder and lightning. So we, the essence of the energy of thunder and lightning, Shango invokes that, or Oshun, the sweet rivers, the sweet waters. Oh, on that point too, there are people who will knock and say, oh, Nigeria, this is what this deity does, and this in the new world, this is what that deity does, but that ain't right and that's not real. How you gonna tell folks what's not right and what's not real when over 400 years, these are the traditions that like got our people through, that got our ancestors through? Stuff change and evolve. Like these religions are constantly evolving, constantly changing. So yes, Oshun might have been the Ogun River, which was like the largest and biggest river in, Nigeria and Yoruba land. But in the New World, no, I'm sorry, I meant to say Yemiya. But in the New World, Yemiya is the ocean. And she's largely the top part of the ocean. Olokun is the bottom of the ocean, the depths of the ocean. And again, Olokun, like my elders are always reminding me, is that, that what African people needed to survive, like the stability, like the power of that ocean is what got us through on this side of the Atlantic, and is so important for our stability. So that's going to be different for continental Africans than it's going to be for people in the New World. Because remember, religion was created by people, I was about to say man, woman, non-binary folk, to do what makes sense of the world, to make sense of like human existence and life and phenomena, right? So in the New World, these are the deities that came over, that crossed over, that evolved and that changed to give us what we need. There's also like Ogun, who can be found in Vodou and in Yoruba cosmology, that was like in Benin, in Yoruba land or whatever. And so you have like other deities also that can be found in different systems, and particularly when you have a whole bunch of enslaved Africans who were mixed together from different nations. Even like Mami Wata is found in water spirits in different traditions across the Atlantic, across the diaspora, and across the continent. So this whole idea of what's pure and what's not, I think is some bullshit. You just got to find what's right for you. I hope this was enlightening for some people. If I said some things that offended folks, my apologies. If I said some things that were slightly incorrect, I'm always learning too. Like, I'm a student. I am not I know everything. That's not what I'm here to do. I'm here to learn. So as I learn, I'm going to share. John Mbiti wrote a book.
Last week, West Coast rap icon Ice Cube continued to move forward with his agenda called Contract with Black America. Collectively, we found out via Twitter, of course, and we also found out that his contract was adopted under the moniker Platinum Package by the Trump administration. This news set Black Twitter ablaze. Late in the evening on last Wednesday, Cube took to IG Live to let people know his plans and that he took his contract with Black America to both major parties. Biden's camp told him they agreed but could not commit to working on it until after the election. When I first heard the news, I immediately went to hear what Cube had to say and felt that his actions were genuine. I then had a conversation with Grandfather Clock of KPFT's Quantum Leap Radio, offering the best in hip-hop. And he actually made some good points. He felt like we were too close to the election to introduce new ideas to be adopted by the current two-party system, and he also pointed out that if the plan didn't have monetary backing, what was the point? He really made me think when he argued that Cube was being used to further suppress the black vote by the GOP. And you know what? He might be right.
But you don't have to take my word for it.
I was able to mash up two comprehensive interviews one with 6 African American panelists, including 3 men from MSNBC's Saturday show, AM Joy, now hosted by Tiffany Cross, and an interview with Houston's own Roland Martin with the Today Was a Good Day rapper himself. Listen to these views and opinions and let us know what you think.
My takeaway, Tiffany, is that he, in that effort to center Black folks at, in the economy of ideas, he is unfortunately equating the wrongs of both sides of the political equation. He is saying Democrats have done us wrong, Republicans have done us wrong, and thus we need to, essentially divest ourselves of both of them until they earn our votes. Well, essentially, we got less than 20 days until this election. How are they going to earn our votes? Well, Joe Biden can't propose legislation right now in order to earn our votes. What is he going to say? And I think, frankly, I thought his approach to Ice Cube as Ice Cube described it to me seemed to make sense. He said he agreed with 85% of the plan and said he would address the plan after he's elected, if he's elected. To me, that makes practical sense. He says, I'm going to act upon these objectives if I'm president. That to me says, I'm not going to promise you what I can't deliver.
I met with the White House in 2018. They told me directly in 2018, we think we can get 20% Black male support in the 2020. So it didn't, they were fully aware of that.
Why'd you meet with him? Why'd you meet with him?
I'm a journalist.
Why'd you meet with him?
I'm a journalist.
What'd you meet with him to talk about?
I'm a journalist. I met with him to talk about public policy issues, to ask them those various
public
questions.
Public policy issues, and
right.
Their thing was to get 20% of the vote.
No, right.
Okay.
No, they said not 20% of the vote.
Did they think they was going to get that for free?
Right. This is what they said. They said they believe they could get 20% of the Black male vote, and they specifically said they were going to use criminal justice reform and economic policies.
Why did they think they can get 20% of the Black male vote? Why do they think that?
Because they said they think that they can appeal to disaffected Black men. They said point blank, they know Black women don't like them.
Why can they appeal to that demographic? Who's not appealing to that demographic? How can they swoop in and get it?
Who?
That should have been covered.
What do you mean?
This is what I'm asking. How can they swoop in and get something that's supposed to be covered?
Well, first of all, that's not the case because in 2012, between Obama and Romney, there was a 9-point gap between Black men and Black women who voted for Obama and Romney. In 2013, with Trump and Hillary Clinton, that expanded to 13%. Now, when you look at 2020, they believe that, we think there's an opportunity here for us to be able to appeal to Black men on economic policies because they say Black women can't stand it.
Well, it's not being done for Black men in this country that the number's growing.
Because, first of all, because the difference between Black men and Black women, Black men are more likely to be...
Why don't the
hold up. You asked the question. I'm going to answer it. Because this is from focus groups, from polling data. Black men are more appealed by Trump's anti-immigration position than Black women. That's one. That's one of the issues there. One of the issues that we also see is that we've seen where Black men feel as if the Democrats have appealed more to Black women than Black men. Thirdly, Donald Trump, by touting the First Step Act, saying he got criminal justice reform done and Democrats didn't, which is actually a lie. The mistake that Democrats have made is they haven't taken credit for the First Step Act because if the Democrats don't pass it in the House, it actually don't get done. And so they see an opportunity to be able to target Black men who are disaffected by both parties by appealing to their pocketbooks, their 401ks, by using tax policy, and that's what their strategy is.
Your research about Black men and the Trump administration is mind-blowing. Every time you send out information, I'm just blown away. Tell me why Trump is making inroads with a small fraction of Black men.
Thanks for having me, Tiffany. That's an important point, right, is that the overwhelming majority of Black men are supporting Donald Trump and supporting Democrats up and down the ballot. But are supporting Joe Biden. But Donald Trump is not trying to win a majority of Black men. He's trying to just kind of chip away at the margins here and put together a new coalition. And I knew during the Super Bowl in February when he spent $11 million to have Alice Johnson come on TV after being in jail for 22 years and say, thank you, Donald J. Trump, for releasing me. I knew then that Black men were not a marginal part of his strategy. They were his path to victory. And since then, we have seen his campaign go from spending $55,000 on criminal justice Facebook ads before George Floyd's death to spending $6.6 million on criminal justice Facebook ads. And I want to be clear about what those Facebook ads say, because every single one of them is structured the exact same way. Democrats have failed you. Joe Biden has failed you, and that is why your president signed the First Step Act. What he's doing is redefining Democrats to a segment of the black male voters that are cynical towards Democrats, that are frustrated towards Democrats, and he's really starting to chip away a margin. And what concerns me the most, because Joe Biden has put together a coalition that I do think can deliver him to victory, even if he gets 75 to 80% of the black male votes. But that will not deliver the Senate. Gary Peters cannot win Michigan with 75% of black men's votes.
When you have a problem, when you see 9 points in 2012 to go to 13 points in 2016, and it might go to 20, you got a problem. So you better focus on that and shore it up, which means you better speak to those issues, speak to those men, having those surrogates doing it, but also speaking to the policies. I've been covering this very issue when it comes to these black men for months. Now, Democrats haven't done it. Now, folks are sort of trying to pay attention now. But I actually was talking to Tom Perez and the DNC about this 4 years ago. So I got to ask you this too, because on that particular point there. So I got an email from someone, and they said, why is Ice Cube only talking about this contract now? So the person wanted me to ask, where was Ice Cube doing the primary? Where is he in 2018? How do you answer people who say that?
I was actually just, being an artist, rapping, thinking all this stuff was covered, thinking people that actually was in power was out doing their job, making sure they had something specifically for black people to win. And when I looked up, I realized all this stuff is not specifically for black people. It's for minorities. It's for people of color. It's for everybody but us. So, I had to kind of take it upon myself to do something that was strictly for black people.
You made some really interesting comments with our pal Joy Reid, and you said that you think Donald Trump thinks that black men are stupid. Expand on that, because it does seem like there's a reason why he's going after black men. And I had Bruce Lavelle on this show and asked, what does outreach to black women look like? Is there any outreach? And he got a little tongue-tied. Why the focus on black men from this particular administration? I don't think it's an effort to get them to vote for him as much as it's appearance. But what do you think?
No, Trump, and you're right, Tiffany, Trump's goal isn't necessarily to get black men to vote for him. Trump's goal is to play into the cynicism that black men legitimately have towards this country, right? Because we've been mistreated by almost every single group of people in this country. We've been let down by the government. His goal is, if I can't get your vote, I want you to be cynical enough that you don't vote at all. And I'm going to make sure that happens by, making it harder to vote around the country, not doing anything about COVID, which is killing black men at a rate higher than we died, during the Middle Passage. And then on top of that, using these sort of false equivalencies to say that Joe Biden is just as bad as Donald Trump. Donald Trump, who in the 1970s was discriminating against people. Donald Trump, who in the 1980s was saying the exonerated five should be executed. Donald Trump, who has called on white nationalists to keep black people from voting. Donald Trump, whose Justice Department hasn't done anything about George Floyd, hasn't done anything about Breonna Taylor, hasn't done anything about Sandra Bland. So for Donald Trump to reach out to Ice Cube or Steve Harvey or Jim Brown or anybody else like that and say, I'm the better option, he must think we're stupid. He must think we're not paying attention to what the man has actually done. And I want to say this really quick, Tiffany, because I think it's important. I understand the cynicism. I understand the frustration. But what we also can do as entertainers in the black community is come up with a plan in the 11th hour of a campaign and put marshmallows and chocolate and graham crackers together and think we created s'mores. No, you didn't. There are tons of plans out there that Ice Cube could have tackled onto beforehand, and that's one of the issues here as well.
So for me, I told everybody what I was going to do, And I did it. And, you know, they exploited it. But if I would have, you know, did something for Biden, they would have exploited it too. So that's just part of the game. The thing is this. The thing is to get movement. The thing is to make sure that we move the needle no matter who's elected.
I agree.
Our program has to be pushed through. So non-dialogue to me is
not
how.
No. Here's the deal.
How you do it.
Here's the deal, Cube. I'm not against dialogue. I sat in 2 meetings with Trump and with other television anchors as well. I've been challenging them. Well, I want you to come talk to black media. I know of other African Americans who've been meeting with them on PPP, on other issues as well. The thing for me is this here. I judge folks on what you do. And what I look at is Donald Trump goes to Atlanta, makes this big old announcement about his platinum plan, and I'm sitting there going. So, for instance, I'll pull it up. When I see this plan, and then I see in here where he goes, make Juneteenth a national holiday. Well, first of all, that could have happened in July, but Senator Rob Johnson of Wisconsin stood up and blocked it in the Senate. Donald Trump said nothing, tweeted nothing, did nothing. He said in here also about the anti-lynching bill. Same thing. Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky stood up, blocked it in the Senate. Donald Trump said nothing, did nothing. He in here talks about prosecute the KKK and Antifa. Hell, when they had the debate with Joe Biden, he tried to shut Joe Biden down when he was quoting Christopher Wray, the FBI director, who said the greatest threat of terrorism in America is white domestic terrorism. But the thing is, when I was sitting here, and again, I looked in May. No, hold on one second. But here's my point. In May, when the Biden this is what it's called, the Lift Every Voice, the Biden Plan for Black America. I went through the entire plan and broke it down. Then I went through the Trump Platinum Plan and broke it all down. The issue for me is that when it comes to Trump's plan, there's no specificity. There just simply isn't. Even when you talk about programs, I will say when I go through Biden's program, when he's talking about state small business credit initiative, expand new markets tax credit, improve and expand the SBA programs that most effectively support black-owned businesses, and laying things out that are specifics. That's the deal. I'm looking at a 22-page plan from Biden and a 1-page plan for Trump, and I'm sitting there going, and I went through Trump's plan. I'm like, there's nothing there. It's a lot of words. Not really, because it's only 1 page. But the deal is, I'm like, dude, you've been the president. You want to make this whole deal how you ushered in economic prosperity, which really all started under Obama beginning in 2010. But it is lacking. Do you believe that the Trump campaign greatly overstated your involvement for the purpose of them being able to say, we have attached ourselves to Ice Cube? Did you believe that you were used politically for their purposes as opposed to really what happened?
Look, I knew whoever I engaged with would use that politically. I don't care about that part.
You talked about reaching out to people. Did you connect with the Congressional Black Caucus at all? Because they reached out after they saw what happened yesterday. They reached out to me. And they sent me this. They sent me, go to my iPad, guys. Come on. Platinum Plan versus.
See anything.
Okay. I was talking to the control room. Right. I'm going to read it to you. Platinum Plan versus Contract with Black America versus CBC legislation. You call for your CBWA calls for ending qualified immunity, banning chokeholds, and elimination of no-knock warrants. The CBC says all of that is included in the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, but it hasn't been enacted by the folks there in Congress. I mentioned Juneteenth, the federal holiday. The same thing about anti-lynching law. Your contract calls for baby bonds of $1,000 for all new babies. The CBC says that's in their CBC's Jobs and Justice Act. You proposed a plan for neo-reconstruction. The CBC said we gave President Trump a 125-page detailed plan to do this in 2017. 4 years later, we've seen nothing. And according to the CBC, and I want to get you to respond to this here, according to the CBC, you propose a one-time interest-free home loan for qualified black Americans. The CBC says, quote, this plan only addresses access to a loan for certain black people. It does not address necessary relief provisions to prevent foreclosures and expand forbearance for homeowners. But the CBC Jobs and Justice Act does. And so what the Congressional Black Caucus says is the things that you're saying that these things have not been done, have not been focused on, they say It has been done. It's literally in our bills. They were passed by the House but ignored by the Senate. The Black Census Project that Alicia was working on, they dropped in 2019. She's saying they have been working on those things. And so just your response to that was, especially with the CBC saying, no, it's actually in our bills that have been passed. But they were passed by the House but ignored by the Senate.
On October 8th, it was announced by a friend via Facebook post that well-known Houston journalist and transgender activist Monica Roberts had passed away. Initially, it was reported that she had been a victim of a hit-and-run accident, but following an autopsy, it was confirmed by the Harris County medical examiner that she had in fact suffered a medical emergency. Officials said Roberts was killed by a blood clot and had heart disease as an underlying condition. Roberts was the creator of the award-winning blog Transgrio, which has been covering the trans community since 2006. The GLAAD Media award-winning blog not only covered the violence against, but also shared the accomplishments within the trans community, according to Out magazine. Tributes to Roberts poured in over social media, and in reaction to the news that she had died, Alfonso David, president of the Human Rights Campaign, called Roberts an icon and a trailblazing voice for transgender rights. Here is Roberts in 2016 accepting the GLAAD Award.
Thank you, GLAAD, for this unexpected but deeply appreciated honor. On behalf of the community and myself, I humbly accept this award. When blogging began to go mainstream in 2004, I was writing a column for a local monthly LGBTQ newspaper in Louisville, Kentucky. Trans-oriented blogs addressing the issues germane to the trans community existed, but the common thread was that none of those early trans blogs were discussing issues of importance to trans people of color. Neither were those blogs discussing trans issues and the news of the day from our perspective. After prodding by my friends in Louisville and around the country, predominantly led by my homegirl Jordana Lassane, and my own observations that a person of color-oriented blog was necessary for the growth and maturation of our Black trans community ranks, January 1st, 2006, the first post went up at Transgrio. It's now been a decade, 6.4 million viewers and counting, and nearly 10,000 posts later, and Transgrio is still telling it like it. TI is on behalf of my community from an unapologetically Black perspective and documenting its history. It has also grown beyond its original mission to talk about the issues that affect just trans folks in the African American LGBT community, but affect the entire LGBT community, not only here in the United States, but around the world. One of the things that we've learned, and one of the things that my late father, who was in radio, taught me, that media matters. The power of a blog, I've learned, to shape events is mighty. It's even more potent when you walk the walk and back your words up with deeds. Trans people exist. We are part of the diverse mosaic of human life, and we will not be dehumanized or disrespected by friend, foe, frenemy, or my governor.
Monica Roberts, rest in power. Nearly a year after President Evo Morales was overthrown in a police-military coup that installed the right-wing evangelical Janine Áñez as president, Bolivia's elections have, in a resounding victory, returned the Movimiento al Socialismo, or MAS party, back to power by electing the progressive Luis Arce as its new president. Arce decisively won Bolivia's presidential election on October 18, beating his nearest rival by about 20 points, according to exit polls. MAS also apparently retained its majorities in both houses of Congress. As noted in The Guardian, it's not that everyone who voted for Arce loves MAS or everything about it. Many criticize Morales' mixed environmental record, his prioritization of extractive industry, and his sometimes heavy-handed response to opponents. The deeper reason for the MAS victory lies in the popularity of its policies. It was those policies and their contrast with the current regimes, rather than some irrational allegiance to Evo Morales or MAS, as the right often implies, that won the election for Arce. following the military coup in November of last year, security forces massacred dozens of unarmed Ma supporters, and regime opponents faced charges of terrorism and sedition. Racism against the indigenous majority became overt on the streets, and Añez's caretaker cabinet originally included not one indigenous minister. The right offered little to progressive voters disillusioned with MAS. The anti-indigenous, theocratic, and neoliberal ideology of Añez and Camacho enjoys major support only among light-skinned residents in eastern Bolivia. The non-MAS candidates likely also suffered from their identification with the United States. The Trump administration openly rejoiced at the 2019 coup. The OAS, which is funded mostly by Washington, drew increased criticism in Bolivia as evidence mounted of its contribution to the 2019 coup. Arce's landslide margin of victory left no room to contest the results. Just after midnight on October 19th, Añez recognized Arce's victory. Carlos Mesa, the runner-up, did so the next morning. From Telesur English, this is Luis Arce speaking after his victory.
It's been a Pacific day in which most of the Bolivian people have gone to the polls to cast their vote. On our behalf, our commitment, we have a commitment to carry forward our plan of action. And as we've been saying, we will govern for all of the Bolivians. We will build a government of national unity. We will build the unity of our country. We are going to work and we're going to reconduct our process of change with no hate and learning and overcoming our mistakes as the Movimiento MAS. And I think today, as an old song says, has been for the people what belongs to the people.
That is all the time that we have with you today. If you want to let us know what you think about everything we were unpacking today, or if you want to catch any of our previous shows, you can find us at AconC Media, AconC Media, on Instagram and on Mixcloud. Houston Indie Media would not be possible without the help and the generous support of our listeners. Help keep us on your Friday night dial by going to kpft.org and go to the Donate Now button. Don't forget to choose Houston Indie Media from the drop-down menu. It's fast, easy, and you help keep independent radio alive. Thank you for your support. This was Angela.
Con Courtney.
Reminding you, don't hate the media.
Be the media.
Peace.
Peace.
You better stop the things you do. I ain't lying. I ain't lying. You know I can't stay. You're running around. You meditated. Can't stay.